welcome to today's episode where we are talking to first-time home sellers. Okay, so we've had quite a few people contact me and say, hey, I want to sell my home, but I don't even know where to start. And honestly and truly, the number one thing to do is to contact your trusted realtor first. And here's why, is unfortunately what happens is by the time the seller says, yes, I'm thinking about selling, then they start all of the projects and then they contact me 6 months later and I go in and have to tell them that unfortunately the things they spent money on did not increase their value. For example, I had a homeowner who had harvest gold countertops, but their thought process was that instead of Jill's face right now, harvest gold, did you know that was a color? That's like the old school yellow. Harvest gold sounds attractive compared to old school yellow. Right. Harvest gold. It's back in the day of avocado green. Oh, now she knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, the home seller needed to sell, and they knew they were going to sell, so they jumped in and started kind of a light remodel. And what they did was they spent a bunch of money on high-end appliances, and I mean like very expensive appliances. And even though they were great appliances, in the long run, it did not increase the value of the home, because those appliances are not really figured in when it comes to the actual appraisal value. One of the biggest mistakes they made, they had spent like a ridiculous amount on a digital refrigerator, the kind that speaks to you and that you can put in the shopping list and it'll go to your phone and all of that. The buyer was thrilled to get that refrigerator, but in the end, they still had to negotiate a countertop repair because nobody wanted the harvest gold. So, number one thing for a home seller, the moment you think that you might want to sell is actually the best time to reach out to the realtor. For one, they can come out and do a walkthrough and tell you how much you really do need to do or maybe not do to get the house ready. They can advise you as to the best time of the year. One of the things that cracks me up in our market is we are a college town. And so realtors who come in from out of area who have no concept of that will come in, they'll be showing a home in, say, early July, and they'll say, this home has been on the market 60 days, so we're going to lowball the seller. No. Unfortunately for that poor buyer who chose a realtor from out of area, that buyer is going to get outbid because a local realtor will know that that is when the bulk of our buyers jump on board because they're trying to secure housing before the school year. So finding the realtor that is local and starting those questions and knowing kind of what's happening, when you should put the house on the market, what you should spend money on, very, very important. The second thing that a seller should think about, and by contacting their trusted real estate professional, that real estate professional should lead them down this path, but avoiding the obvious 3 Ds. Jill's like, what are the 3? Can you guess what the 3 Ds are?
No. Decor.
Decor. Not quite. It's going in a different direction. So one of the mistakes that sellers make is that sometimes what their situation is a little too obvious. Now, unfortunately, the 3 Ds, death, they've lost a spouse or a loved one, disease, there is some kind of a health issue, or divorce. The 3 Ds. And unfortunately, those can all be super obvious in certain manners. So let me explain. We had a seller. I went to list their house. They had a very tight time frame. The family had come in for the father's funeral, and the mom wanted to leave town with the kids when they left. But here was the mistake they made. The entire house was full of plants. There were plants everywhere from the funeral services. There were the little memorial, what are those called? Memorial booklets yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. Those were everywhere. And there were boxes of dad's things for donations sitting around everywhere. Now, the house was lovely, and realistically, it would have shown fine, and it would have even have photographed fine. But a buyer who was savvy and their realtor would have realized that there's been a death in the family and that potentially this seller needed to sell and get out. So I worked with the family to get these items relocated. We got the house on the market, got it sold, and she was able to leave town with her adult children and not have to fly separately later on. So it worked out great. Now, obviously, we didn't close while she was in town. We were able to have the title company go and close her. But it made a difference because we were able to get all the paperwork done and have the house show ready. The second one, so that's the death. The disease, that's kind of a broad spectrum, but that's just also being ill. So when you have a lot of walkers, shower chairs, hospital beds, wheelchairs, medicine everywhere, that is a major indication that something serious is going on. And what I found is that sometimes that paraphernalia, if you will, is still not all necessary. Maybe the family member that is having the health issues have already overcome it, or they've moved on to like a rehab facility or something like that. In those instances, those items can be stored in the garage, in the shop, or you just take them off premise. In the event that some of those items are still needed for photos and for showings, what we have you do is pare down as much as possible. And even though it's a major inconvenience, we will still have you store those items in the garage when at all possible. Because here's the thing, you should not be at home during the showings. So things to the garage can make a huge difference. Buyers, there's two types of buyers. There's the buyer that feels just sad and bad about your situation, and they feel like they're almost making it worse by buying your home, which they're not. Or two, they think, aha, I've got you, and they're going to come in and lowball the heck out of you. So we've covered death and we've covered disease. The third one is the big D, divorce, right? Now you're thinking, well, how would they know if I'm getting a divorce or not? Well, they look in your closet. And when half the closet is empty and it's only guy things, or the opposite, only gal things that are left and the other half is empty, then they kind of know that something has just happened. So my recommendation is that you spread your things out so it doesn't look so obvious. They could think just a single person is living there as opposed to somebody has come in and moved it out. One unfortunate story is one time, unfortunately, there was, I don't know, this one might be too emotional to share. Okay. Well, what had happened is when we went in to show, it was my buyer. I did not know the seller, didn't know what was going on, but there were several photos that had been torn in half, and one of them was obviously a wedding photo. I know. And one side of the closet was emptied out. There was a dust area where you could tell boxes had been moved from that side. One side of the bed, that side of the bed, the tabletop was completely empty and the drawers were open and empty. So it was very obvious that something had happened and they were down to one person. And my buyer was an investor and they went in really aggressively and got a great deal on the home. So these things will make a difference for a buyer. So it's really important that if at all possible, you don't want it to be obvious that any of those things are happening currently for the seller. Now, some other really obvious things is don't leave the real estate listing laying around. I'm shocked at how often I go into a home and where they've listed with the realtor, what their net is going to be, what their pay, everything is just laying right there on the counter. That should never happen. You need to put your personal documentation away, especially when it has to do with the home. The other thing is we've gone into the home before and there would just be stacks of mail on the countertops, kitchen counter, and it's like past due, past due, past due. And guys, this is not someone pilfering through your mail. This is just laying out. You know how like when you grab your mail and you come in and you throw it on the kitchen counter? Or when you walk in the door in that little table and it says past due. these are major indications that there are some financial struggles. And if I'm representing you as a seller, I'm going to tell you this is not in your best interest to have this information out there. Now, I know what some of you savvy investors are thinking is, I can find out all of this pretty much at the courthouse. And that's true, you can. But the average buyer is not going to go through that trouble, okay? And in fact, I think the average buyer doesn't even read the newspaper anymore, so they may not see the death notice, they may not see the divorce notice, all of those things. So anytime you can get ahead of it as a seller and keep your personal information personal and private, I highly recommend it. So those are the 3 Ds that you want to avoid having it be obvious if you're a first-time seller. And I think decor could work, Jill. We could say decor is start with the realtor and see if you need to change up your decor. And that could be pre-packing, that could be changing the avocado countertops or harvest gold countertops instead of spending money on expensive upgrades that really aren't going to change it. So we're going to change this episode. Instead of the 3 Ds, we're going to go with 4 Ds. How about that? So decor, divorce, death, and disease. As a seller, those are things that you need to be mindful of. And again, choosing a knowledgeable realtor with proven results that are local, because again, we are in a college town, and if you really don't understand what happens in our market with, we have too many houses and then all of a sudden we have no houses. And again, understanding the price point, that's not going to happen if you have a $500,000 home. We're not going to have people clamoring in August to buy that necessarily. So knowing the market, being familiar with the market, and choosing the right person to help you through this. Those are my tips for a first-time seller. Guys, please like, follow, and share. If you have questions or there's a topic that you would like for me to discuss, reach out. We'd be happy to consider it. Thanks, everyone.